back a little bit. The core interpersonal qualities that practitioners bring to a relationship include a lot of different things. Very good. Warmth, respect, genuineness, empathy, and acceptance are the core interpersonal qualities. If you look at these and you study psychology, one of the things you'll notice is this fits, I can even think, Rogers, Carl Rogers. And social work has actually adopted all of this. So this is, when I talk about counseling, a lot of times I say, well, you know, there's a lot of different ways to do this. But of course, if you're a social worker, you counsel in a specific way. And this is actually the way that social workers try to support their clients. They show warmth. They always show respect to their clients. They try to be a genuine person, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. I mean, if you have on different clothes than everybody else, then you feel different than everybody else. So it's kind of hard when I put on my sport coat. Am I a different person than when I'm wandering around my house with a shirt with no sleeves, you know? Am I a different person? Is that the genuine person, or is this the genuine person? Well, I'm old enough that I've figured out how to be genuine almost all the time. So genuineness is not the easiest thing in the world. Sometimes we put on airs when we talk to select individuals. When they put all those funny letters behind your name, M.A., Ph.D., that kind of stuff, B.A., M.A., Ph.D. behind your name, a lot of times you start acting differently and talking differently. But of course, with your clients, you need to be as genuine as possible. You need to show them empathy, and we're going to talk about empathy in just a second, but empathy is really important. Empathy doesn't mean you feel sorry for the person. Empathy means that you understand where they're coming from. Okay, that's empathy. And of course, you have to accept your client no matter who they are. And of course, we've talked about trying to counsel people that were pedophiles, for example, or people that were rapists or sexual abusers. Not the easiest thing in the world, because you want to punch these people. Okay, I want to punch these people, but you really can't. You have to accept them for who they are, because sometimes there's something in their past that has created the person that they are. And for that reason, of course, you have to accept them. You need to develop trust in your clients. They need to develop trust in you, actually. Being understanding or empathetic works. This will give them the idea that they can trust you. You need to listen attentively to everything that they say, and you need to show them respect. And if you can do this, then that will develop trust between your clients. Now, as I told you before, there are a couple different people that are really difficult to get through to. One of them are people with antisocial personality disorder. They're pathological liars. Anybody that's a liar, you can't trust them. You don't know exactly how they're reacting to you. So that's kind of an interesting situation. The other are alcoholics. They're really difficult to get through to, because they have a knowledge that goes well beyond anything that you understand. That was a good way to put it. They're so much damn smarter than you are, because when they're drunk, they're brilliant. Or they don't have to worry about anything. So they know that alcohol, that they need to do anything to be able to continue to drink. And for that reason, they will try to get you. They will try to manipulate you. So that's kind of an interesting situation. Developing warmth. You need to be kind and accepting in a non-judgmental way. You need to be nice to these people. Not the easiest thing in the world. I had a guy that came to my office, wanted to borrow money. Never met the guy before. Why does he think I'm going to lend him money? I don't know. Somebody told him that I'd given money away before. Anyway, really kind of interesting. And I had this long conversation with him. He's really a fascinating person. But I didn't give him any money. Stupid, but I'm not that stupid. Well, I am pretty damn stupid. Expression of warmth in one culture may, of course, be perceived differently in another culture. And as we said last time, sometimes hugging up north is everybody hugs almost all the time up north. Down here, not so much. If you're over in Europe, you touch cheeks and that kind of stuff. So you never know exactly how you show warmth. At being somebody from Indiana, where our personal space is like massive, which is too close, our personal space is pretty big. And Sarah's the same way. Sarah's from Canada, and their personal space. The English have the widest personal space of any of the Europeans. The French have the smallest. The French are always touching each other, which is kind of interesting. So if somebody comes up, if somebody is French and they want to meet you and they think that they're going to like you, they'll come up and give you a kiss. I mean, it's really kind of on the cheek, give you a big passionate kiss. But the French are that way, and then the English, they don't get within arm's length of one another. That's too close. So they're about an arm length and a half away. And the Canadians, of course, are mostly English. Australians are kind of the same way, as interesting as that is, unless they're drunk. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors from that person's viewpoint. As we attune to another person's internal state, a feeling of being connected develops. So you need to be empathic. You need to understand what their problem is. And that's really all empathy means. Being empathic involves having the willingness and the flexibility to put yourself in the other person's reality, which isn't the easiest thing in the world. Sometimes we create realities that make us feel better, make us look better to ourselves. But the reality is not real. It's not the way the world actually works. But you have to understand their reality from their point of view. And of course, if we're dealing with different ethnic groups, different races, sometimes this is very difficult. If you've never come in contact with an individual, if you've never come in contact with a white person, you may stereotype and think that all white people are greedy. I don't know. What are the stereotypes about white people? Greedy, tall, handsome. That's not it, is it? Obviously, I'm not white. I'm too short to be a white guy, so it must be something else. I do have a nice car, though. It's about the only nice thing about it. It's my car. Empathy is understanding assumptions, beliefs, and/or their worldview. So you need to understand their worldview. Right now, with all the strange bifurcation that's taking place in the United States, with the Trumpites, as we are referring to these individuals all of a sudden, understanding their worldview is a bit difficult. I have these guys on my Facebook page. One of these guys I grew up with, and here all of a sudden he's telling me how horrible Barack Obama is and how wonderful Donald Trump is, and that Hillary Clinton has horns and a tail and all kinds of interesting things. And of course we debated all through the election cycle, and now that the election is over with, he is still giving me information about how horrible Barack Obama is, which is kind of curious because he doesn't have any power. I don't really understand. But I do understand his worldview. I see that it's completely different than mine. He's local and I'm global. My perspective is global. It has to be because I was in the military forever and I've lived all over the world. So my worldview is global. His is Kentucky. Okay, I mean that's it. The odd thing is that he just hates Obamacare or the ACA, but he's on it. That's the part that confuses me the most. He's on it, and it's actually saving him money. And if they do away with the ACA, he won't have any health insurance, which is kind of confusing.
Then who is he going to blame?
Obama, of course. It's Obama's fault. Everything turns out to be Obama's fault. Really kind of fascinating. But he's screaming about these things. He wants the ACA to go away. He thinks it's costing the United States too much money, which is probably true to some extent. And that's what he's worried about. He's not worried about, he had a stroke when he was 32 because he was snorting too much cocaine. Oh, man. So he's got medical problems, some really serious medical problems, as you can imagine. And if his health care goes away, his health care goes away. Wait a minute, how old is he? Oh, he's got Medicare now. He's okay, he's got Medicare now. So now he wants the ACA to go away. All of a sudden I'm doing the mathematics. Yeah, he's got Medicare. So he doesn't want anybody to have health care. Empathy requires understanding another person's subjective experience while maintaining the capacity to differentiate from that person, of course. Empathy is not the same as pity or sympathy. Pity involves sorrow or grief aroused by someone else's suffering, and by golly, if you're a counselor and you feel pity for somebody else, then you're putting too much emotion into your work. You cannot do that. They will eat you up because they will come in with the saddest stories you've ever heard, and you've got to be tough and listen to it and be empathic, but don't pity them. You can't possibly pity them, because if you do, it's just going to tear you up. Sympathy involves feeling affected by whatever affected the other person. And so, yeah, yes, you can be sympathetic to some extent, but you need to maintain empathy rather than sympathy or pity. If you do that, it's just going to destroy you. People call me a mean son of a bitch, and the reality is my mother was a nice person. But I'm fairly calloused, and the reason I'm calloused is because I've worked in medicine for such a long time. And you see tragedies would come in minute by minute. I mean, sometimes in the emergency room, all these tragedies are coming in, and you're dealing with a child that's just been in an automobile accident. It doesn't look like they're going to survive. I mean, what do? You start crying, or do you try to save their life? You better try to save their life, because that's your damn job, okay? So it's tough, and it's really tough. But you have to callous yourself. The more you can callous yourself, the less you're going to respond to it. The less you respond to it, the more likely that you can help them. Pitying them and sympathizing with them isn't really going to help them at all. You need to have empathy, and then you need to come up with a plan as to how to fix their situation. Does all that make sense? Okay, I'm telling you guys to be mean, but I'm not really telling you to be mean. I'm telling you to be empathic rather than pitying them or being sympathetic. Okay. I know. It took me minutes to figure all this out, because when you're dealing with tragedies, the first real tragedy I had in the emergency room was an airplane crash. And of course everybody died. They always die in an airplane crash. It's going really fast. It hits the ground. What happens? Guess what happens now? And the guy was a friend of mine. And I had to pull him out of the plane after it burned. And we had to wait until because it was hot. So we had to wait before we could pull him out. And I didn't actually pull him out, the fireman pulled him out, but I had to receive the body. And here he was a friend of mine. Of course, he was also a pilot and an officer. And most enlisted people in the Air Force don't really like pilots or officers very much. But I knew this guy because I played ball with him. I played softball with him. And he's a really nice guy for an officer, not very many of those, and for a pilot. And he was really good. And it turned out that's why he killed himself. In the military, if you're a really good flyer, they call you a hot stick, which sounds sexual, and it's supposed to be sexual, so don't even think about that part. But he was a real hot stick, and he was flying at night. He got inverted. Didn't realize he was inverted because he was going so fast, and they told him to pull up because he was getting close to the ground. And he was inverted, and he didn't realize it. Of course, they couldn't read it on radar. So when he pulled up, he actually pulled down. So, yeah, I know. this. Sometimes you make mistakes. And of course, if you look at the instrument, instrument tells you whether you're you know, what angle you are, but of course if you're completely inverted, it looks like you're going the right direction. So when he pulled down, he actually realized what was going on, and he was able to crash in an area that it was a cotton field, so he was able to crash away from people. He was kind of a hero of sorts. Anyway, he's a friend of mine, so that made me tough real fast. Developing your ability to be empathic, not everybody can do it. I mean, the reason that I was receiving his body was because the person that was in charge, I wasn't in charge at that point, the person that was in charge couldn't handle dead bodies. So, you know, he couldn't handle it. So I went out. I was the second one in charge, so I went out and received the body. Turned out it was a guy that I knew. And you could tell, I mean, I could see that he was the person that I thought he was. Anyway, okay. Developing your ability to be empathic. So how in the world do you do this? How do you become empathic? Well, there's a lot of different ways. You need to understand your clients. And one way to do this is by reading novels and professional literature about people from different backgrounds. One of the reasons why we're studying cultural psychology is so that you understand that there are people that ain't the same as you are. Okay, and they're really not the same as you are. And they have different ideas than you do. So if you read novels, and of course, you know, we can make fun of Tony Hillerman all day that he gets lots of things wrong, but the reality is he at least gives people an idea of what the Dene people are like. At least he gives us an idea. Now, it may be completely erroneous, but at least people start thinking that something is different. That the people that live on in the Navajo Nation are not. I know Chris doesn't like this because he's read Tony Hillerman. He thinks he's a pile of crap. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But at least he gives you an idea of what's going on. And if you're dealing with crazy white people, and most of these people don't even realize you guys exist, okay? They just think that everybody wants to act like they do. And that's one of the reasons why they did all the god-awful things that they did. Because they just figured you guys were people that wanted to be like them. So that's why they did that. So you need to understand that people are different, and that people act differently, and they will react differently. So you need to find out as much as you can about this stuff, with the understanding that no matter who you read, it's their perspective. And especially if they're not from that culture, they're not really going to understand what's going on. But it will give you an idea of how these people may think. It allows you to shift gears in your brain so that you're willing to accept somebody that's completely different. If you have no idea what somebody from Bangladesh acts like, what you need to do is you need to read something about people from Bangladesh. For example, what religion do they have? Does anybody know people from Bangladesh? Are they Buddhists? Not very many of them. A minority of them.
Hindu? Would they be more Hindu?
Not at all.
No. What are they then?
Well, they're Muslim.
They're Muslim then.
And the reason they're Muslim, once upon a time, England controlled India. And of course, they were keeping peace between the Muslims and the Hindus in that whole chunk of land called India. And then India, they gave them their independence. This is in 1948. 1948, they gave them their independence, and of course, a civil war immediately broke out between the Hindus and the Muslims. Because about 70% of the population is Hindu, and about 30% are Muslim. And the warfare threatened to become worse and worse and worse. Bloodbaths and whatnot. So that's when Gandhi, of course, said, let's make peace, we can make one government, we're going to be okay. And of course, because Gandhi was Gandhi, everything, the fighting stopped. But then they realized, well, wait a minute, we've got these people that are real staunch Muslims, and they really don't want to be part of India. So those guys broke away and they became Pakistan. And there were chunks large chunks of Muslims in one corner, and there was another large chunk in the other corner. And so they became Pakistan. So there was Pakistan over here, and like 1,000 miles away was East Pakistan. And they were two Muslim countries, and Pakistan is probably one of the most fundamental Muslim countries in the world. Okay. Isn't this fun? Okay, so we've got Pakistan over here, we've got India in the middle, and 1,000 miles away, we've got the other chunk of Pakistan way over here. Well, Pakistan was controlling East Pakistan, and they didn't really give a flying flip what these guys over here thought. They were just doing all kinds of horrible things. You know, they were controlling the government, they were controlling all the money, and they weren't giving any money over here. And they were flooding, and there were people starving to death. So East Pakistan decided that they would break away from Pakistan. So in the 1970s, East Pakistan started a revolution to break away from Pakistan, and they became Bangladesh. Freedom fighters, the whole thing. The Indians tried to help, but of course, which side are they going to help? Are they going to help the Pakistanis or the Bangla, people from Bangla? They speak the same language, which is confusing because as the Indians, but they don't speak the same language as the Muslims. They speak Pashto and all kinds of interesting languages. Anyway, so Bangladesh broke away from them, but they're almost all Muslim. So why am I using that as an example? I don't know. I had a student that was from Bangladesh, and he gave me all this stuff, and he gave me all this information. Of course, I'm totally ignorant about everything going on, except the history. I knew the history. Evidently, cricket is huge. So everything is cricket. It's kind of like in the United States, everything's football, you know, or basketball, or baseball, or whatever. But in Bangladesh, it's cricket. And evidently they beat Pakistan like 3 years ago, and they still celebrate the day they beat Pakistan. As stupid as that is. Okay, so you need to read novels and professional literature about those select individuals, with the understanding that if you're reading professional literature, you're probably reading about people that have been there for only a couple weeks or a couple months or whatever. So their understanding of the culture is probably incomplete, let's say that. Okay. The novels, potentially, especially if you read novels of people from that country or from that ethnic group, you'll potentially get some fairly good information. If you're reading about the Japanese, read a Japanese author. I mean, it makes sense. They have a lot of really good Japanese authors. And they will give you good information about what's going on. I don't know if there are any Navajo authors that people read. Are there?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
Lori Toppen-Hanso.
I'm sorry?
Lori Toppen-Hanso is one.
Okay.
She's a poet.
Just you written? Oh, she's a poet.
Yeah. And then there's it's a new girl's name that wrote the book. Somebody gay that wrote like My Love, My Land or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or
Perfect. We don't have to read Hillary.
LaFrenda Frank is a Navajo author.
Oh, she-
Orlando White too. They're authors as well.
I didn't know they had
They have
books.
books.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I'll read those. See what happens. Throw out all my Tony Dillon. No, I like that. They're mysteries, okay, and they're kind
They're
of fun.
kind of Nancy Drew.
Yeah. But they talk about Route 666. They talk about Ganado. They talk about, it's kind of cool because they have references to all the places around Shiprock. Joining in activities, talking to and getting to know others who have different experiences, of course. Somebody that's been there, you can talk to somebody that's been there. Attending classes or workshops focused on specific groups of people. Traveling to different countries and spending time with local residents. But as I tell people, you can, if you visit someplace, you don't really know that place. If you live in someplace, then you know that place. Okay. I had visited this area in 1990 1994, before my wife went to Korea. We came to this area. So did I know anything? I knew a little bit. I knew something about this area. But of course, living here, I have a lot more information. Tons more information. It's more realistic. And I get to talk to you guys, and you give me all kinds of interesting information. But if you just travel to a place, then you're a tourist. And if you're a tourist, you're just looking at all the highlights of some place. But if you're a resident, you actually live in the culture. So then you understand the culture. So I would say, since I've lived in Japan, I have a fairly extensive knowledge about the Japanese culture. Since I've lived I didn't become Japanese. I didn't try to become Japanese. Okay. When I lived in Germany, I lived there for 3 years, and I understand something more about the Germans than somebody that just visited there. Okay? So I have some information about them. Okay. Doing volunteer work in communities or neighborhoods very different from your own. And this gets you used to taking yourself out of your comfort zone. We want to be comfortable in everything that we do. The more comfort we have, the less likely we're going to respond negatively to a situation. So we want to be comfortable. But the reality is that this is a very uncomfortable thing to do. Counseling people is very uncomfortable. You're going to be hearing things that you don't normally hear on a daily basis. So taking yourself out of your comfort zone is really kind of important. How do they interact? How do people interact in different circumstances? People from a different culture than yours. Watching popular movies about people who are different from you is another way to find these things out. And I've got a whole list of movies at the end of the chapter, as much fun as that is. Respect. Respect or unconditional positive regard is expressed by affirming and appreciating clients without condoning their harmful behaviors. You can love somebody without saying it's okay if you're a drunk. You can do that. You can appreciate them. You can be married to somebody and not like some things about them. You don't have to like everything about them. Of course, if it has to do with alcohol, it's a kind of a different situation. You need to look for the good in the individual, and there is good in everyone. Regard for thoughts, feelings, and abilities, noticing, acknowledging, and highlighting clients' strengths, their capabilities, their resilience, their coping ability, their potential, and their resources. You need to focus on their strengths. The best way to get a person to listen to you is by chronicling their strengths. And if you can talk about their strengths, it will make them see that you have really acknowledged who they actually are. If you're only looking at the negative things about them, then they don't think that you really understand them or know them. So you need to chronicle the positive aspects of them. You need to be polite and follow appropriate cultural norms, whatever those norms may potentially be. Genuineness, you need to show them genuineness. You need to be sincere and authentic. You need to be real and allow your humanness and uniqueness to be seen. You need to be natural, to be honest, and to be forthright. And you need to admit your own mistakes, which is the hardest thing in the world. I blame you guys for everything that happens. It wasn't my fault. It was my really bad students. They're horrible. I don't know if you've ever listened to a professor. A lot of them blame their students. Yeah, like you're the ones that are presenting all this material. I couldn't talk today, and it was Aaron's fault. He kept drinking that brown stuff. What is that stuff? Is it a protein drink?
Yeah.
He kept drinking protein drink, and I could smell it. And is it coffee flavored or chocolate? Chocolate. Good. Congratulations. How do you like it?
It's good.
Okay. Does it work?
Yes.
So it wasn't my fault, it was Aaron's fault, drinking brown stuff. Of course, he always drinks brown stuff, even when you're drinking coffee, it's brown, right? I don't know, it's not brown like yours, it's yellow. Yours looks, well, we'll say what yours looks like, but mine looks like urine, so. It's yellow. You know Mountain Dew's yellow. You ever notice that? Fluorescent yellow, but it's still yellow. Urine is yellow. You ever notice that? No? Okay. If your urine's not yellow, you've got a problem, okay? If it's blue, you've got a really serious problem. And if it's black, you got a really, we need to go to the doctor. Offering advice, inappropriate to offer advice. It's inappropriate to offer advice. These are common mistakes that individuals make. You shouldn't offer advice. They need to come up with the solutions as much as possible. The more advice you give, the more likely you're going to make a mistake, which has always been my problem. It's inappropriate to offer advice until you have fully understood the people involved, their challenges and situation, and collaborated with the clients on setting goals. So you need to work together. Okay. Hopefully you won't have to give advice. Hopefully they will come up with their own solutions. However, some cultures do not do that. You're the expert, therefore you have to tell them what to do. Asians tend to be this way. Well, let's see, let me think. Okay, the Japanese, yes. Chinese, yes. The Koreans, yes. Koreans not as much as the Japanese. Koreans are pretty good at coming up with their own solutions. But they still think that you're the expert, and therefore, in order for them to have to pay you, you have to give them something. Okay. The Japanese won't even. Well, my experience with the Japanese. Another culture, another way of doing things. You can't get them to say the first word. It's really irritating. They will tell you their story, but they'll leave things out. Usually it's the part that they really need to talk about. Offering advice, and they want it to be done as quickly as possible because they feel like they're paid for everything. Which they probably are. Offering advice before you know what the clients have already tried can be experienced as not respecting their strengths and capacities. So you need to be really careful about this. You need to make sure that you've heard their whole story. And a lot of times they'll leave things out. And so it's your job to figure out what those things that they've left out. And you need to get that part of their story before you try to give them any advice. They'll ask for it. They'll ask for it and they haven't given you the whole story. And so then you'll give them advice and they'll say, well, you know, I tried that 2 weeks ago and it didn't work. Thanks for the advice, you know, that kind of thing. I've had clients that everything that I said was wrong. Everything that I said was wrong, which is irritating. Oh, no. Yeah, Cousin Charlie did this. Oh, wait a minute. You didn't even tell me that, Cousin Charlie. Who's Cousin Charlie? Oh, Cousin Charlie's the guy that I lived with for 7 years. Really? Why didn't you tell me that before? Reassuring, in an attempt to reduce pain, you reassure the client. Sometimes this can be inappropriate. Well, it's almost always inappropriate. Sometimes it's premature. You never know what's going to happen. A good example is my daughter had that custody hearing this summer, and I wanted the lawyer to say, well, you've got a really strong case and we're going to win. But she wouldn't say that, and the reason she wouldn't say that is because you never know. You never know what the judge is going to think. Remember, I had that Baptist minister that wanted to take my children away from me just because I didn't go to church. You never know what the judge is going to think. I mean, they don't have to follow the law. They can do whatever the hell they want to do. So she wasn't going to say, you're going to win your case, because that would have been to reassure my daughter. So, of course, my daughter read that as her case was weak, because she didn't really want to leave Florida. She would have had to have changed, okay? And if you change, it's harder than if you do something new. So she didn't want to change. In an attempt to reduce pain, the pain clients feel about their problem can motivate them to solve the problem. Negating the importance of the client's pain can lead them to feel that they are not fully understood or respected. For example, telling someone it will all work out in the end, don't worry about it, indicates the capacity to stop worrying on command. I do this all the time. I try to reassure people all the time. Big mistake, shouldn't do it. Why do I do it? Because I want them to leave feeling better than they did when they came into my office. Okay, so I try to reassure them that everything's going to be okay. But the reality is, I don't know. I have no idea. Usually they short-circuit their own recovery. And the more reassurance you give them, the more likely that they're not even going to try anymore. Oh, he says it's going to be fine, so we'll just float along rather than work toward fixing this problem. And we'll see if it still works out. Sometimes they want me to fail. That didn't sound right, did it? They want me to be wrong, which is kind of interesting. Like I have anything to do with this. Offering excuses, help clients. You need to help clients set goals, asking leading questions, questions that give advice, of course, and this is something that you shouldn't do. Clients need to set their own goals. We don't want to give them advice until we have the entire story. Dominating through teaching. Of course, what I'm doing right now, teaching is dominating or pushing. And of course, anytime you try to teach them something, this is, if you've ever read Ellis, Albert Ellis, he was big on telling people what to do. He was really good at it. He was the beginning of cognitive psychology, which is kind of interesting, or cognitive counseling. So he was very pushy. And did it work? Yeah, it worked fairly well because he was telling people how to fix themselves. And so it was quick, it was specific, and it worked about 25% of the time. So 25% of the time he was right. It can suggest that there's only one right way to do things. And the reality is, and I keep telling you this, I counsel one way because of my personality. If you don't have my personality, and none of you do, thank God, then you really can't do what I do, okay? So you need to develop your own voice. You need to develop your own way of dealing with things. You have your own life experiences. My life experiences are my life experiences. You guys probably never had to put anybody in a body bag. Hopefully none of you have ever had to. Some of you haven't had to put people in a body bag, but I have, and you know, I've done that on a fairly regular basis. So my experiences are completely different from yours. So there's not just one right way to do things. And you need to find your voice. When you first start counseling, you're not going to be sure if you're doing things the right way. But you need to figure it out. And I can't tell you how to act. I can't tell you what to say because you are your own people. Communicating in a dominating way tends to invite people to feel shame or rebellious, to withdraw or become defensive and argue. And of course, this is the biggest problem that I have had is that when I try to tell them, when I give them advice, they become rebellious. And of course, it's the wrong thing just about every time. So there are select individuals I can't counsel. There are select students that I drive them crazy. I'm too flexible. They need organization. They need to know exactly when things are due. And those kinds of people, I drive them crazy. The type A personalities, I drive them nuts. Because I'm a type Z personality. And you all know how I can't tell time. So I let you turn things in whenever you want. And I just had a student that just reamed me in my 111 class because I don't have dates, and she doesn't know when anything is due. She's worried about getting everything done. She wanted more homework, and I didn't give her enough homework, so now she's really upset. And she'll probably complain. But she has no way to complain to, so this ought to be interesting to see who she complains to. Yeah, my classes are kind of unorganized. But at least we get everything done, don't we? I'm going to get through the entire book, you'll see, maybe. Okay, implies, what are we doing? We're dominating through teaching. It implies that there's only one way to resolve an issue, and of course there's tons of different ways. And it's different for every client, and you have to recognize that. And they need to recognize that. Common mistakes that people make, labeling, sophisticated way to judge, criticize, or blame another person, and it's not helpful. This is what trolling's all about. I was reading, and I shouldn't do this, I was reading it was something, and I can't even remember what it was about, but at the bottom these people were talking back and forth, and one guy called, well, I won't tell you what they called him, but I didn't realize you could put those words on the internet. I guess nobody cares if you put it down at the bottom. Anyway, these guys were just screaming at each other in the postings down below. It's really crazy. They were calling each other really nasty names. That doesn't help. That's not really helpful. But of course, we do have to label people to some extent because we have to diagnose. But we don't call them, an effing something around. We try to stay away from that. So we don't want to label. Interrogating why questions are particularly problematic because they sometimes imply judgment and also invite defensiveness. And for that reason, you need to stay away from the word why. Why did you do this? Well, that sounds like it was the wrong thing to do. What happened next is a better way to say it. Not why. Why the hell did you do that? Okay, we're going to talk about some of the movies that you can watch to get specific information about specific types of people. If you wanted to learn about second generation Mexican American Girl, you can watch the movie Real Women Have Curves, which I've never seen. Some of these movies I've seen, some of them I haven't. If you want to understand what's going on in the inner city, of course, some of these are really dated movies. Hoop Dreams, I don't know if you've ever seen Hoop Dreams. It's about the inner city, and it's about two black basketball players in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. Or Detroit, I can't remember. Anyway, Hoop Dreams. It's about two basketball players. Really strange movie. Half of these movies, Sean Penn's in. I haven't figured that one out yet. Inner city white boy who was sexually abused. That's Mystic River. He was sexually abused by his uncle, by his father. I can't remember. Has to do with murder. He's a police officer. Something's going on. I've seen the movie once. It's fairly disturbing. Not the fact that this boy was sexually abused, but the murder that takes place is fairly graphic. It's really kind of an interesting movie. So if you want a really shocking movie, Mystic River is a pretty good movie. This is an old one. This is like Angelina Jolie's first movie. White teenage girl who's mentally ill. She's in a mental institution, and it's called Girl Interrupted. With Winona Ryder and Angelina Jolie. And in the end, one of them commits suicide. I won't tell you which one. Interesting movie. This is another one. This is another one that's fairly shocking. White boy in a neo-Nazi group, American History X. It has Edward Norton in it. Really kind of shocking. The ideas that these people have, that's the most shocking part. Of course, now we just had that rally in Charlottesville where all these American History X people came out and marched around with their vests on, with their pistols on their hips. That was interesting. Bend It Like Beckham. I just saw this movie a couple nights ago. It's about a second generation Indian girl living in London. The fascinating thing is that the director is Indian. And of course, the hero of the show, the main character of the show, is Indian as well. She didn't become a famous actress, but the co-star, Keira Knightley. This is one of her first major major movies. Really fascinating movie, but it gives you all kinds of interesting information about India and the strength of the family in Indian communities. Really fascinating. Kind of cool. And it's about soccer, so there you go. You get to see people play soccer. I Am Sam, there you go, Sean Pennington. People with developmental disabilities, I guess Sam has a developmental disability. And, oh, you watched it? Is it? Did you cry?
It was sad, but it was really
I've never seen it actually. I stay away from this. I've seen this one. This is Radio. It's about about an individual with disabilities. This is Cuba Gooding Jr. is the person with disability. And he starts to help a football team, and the football team picks on him, and everybody, the coach gets really upset and kicks people off the team and like that. And they learn to deal with individuals that have problems. And this is in the Deep South, of course, where people are kind of not very nice to other people. And he's African American, of course, and this is in the South. So that kind of messes. I didn't mean to pick on your brown liquid. Oh no. My family, I've never seen this movie, Three Generations of Dreams, a Mexican American family living in Los Angeles. I've never actually seen this movie, but it's about Mexican Americans in Los Angeles. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? This is one of Johnny Depp's first starring roles. It also has Leonardo DiCaprio in it. One of them has a mental illness and the other one has autism, and I can't remember. I think DiCaprio has autism and Johnny Depp has a mental illness. But it's a white rural family dealing with all kinds of horrible issues. And in the end, everybody survives. I don't think anybody commits suicide or anything. Soul Food, I've seen this movie. This is kind of interesting. African American family facing serious illness and death. And it's the interaction between the sisters. One sister has money and the other sisters don't, and it's really kind of a fascinating movie. Not a very happy movie. None of these are happy movies. Sleeping with the Enemy is kind of a fun movie. No, I'm just kidding. It's about Julia Roberts, and her husband is very controlling, and he's obsessive compulsive, and she is one of the things he's obsessive compulsive about. Eventually she fakes her own death and runs away, and eventually he finds her. Anyway. Women struggling with partners who are physically abusive, and he is physically abusive. He's very controlling. Another movie about women struggling with partners who are physically abusive is Tina Turner's, the story of Tina Turner. What's Love Got to Do with It? Kind of a shocking movie. Ike and Tina Turner. For the longest time, of course I'm old enough to remember Ike and Tina Turner. And who knew that Ike was such a son of a bitch? Yeah, he's a pretty bad guy. I've never seen this movie. I think I can't remember who wrote the story. Whoever wrote the story, in every story, somebody dies, and it breaks your heart. It's about people facing the challenges related to aging, The Notebook. She has Alzheimer's disease, I think, and then she writes a notebook, and they relive their lives, and in the end, well, I'll tell you what happens. Anyway.
Sad.
Is it sad? Well, does everybody die? But they're old.
At the end.
But they're old. Isn't that better? I don't know. Okay. People facing the challenges related to aging on Golden Pond, of course. This is Henry Fonda's last movie. One of Katharine Hepburn's last movies, and of course that's Jane Fonda. And the reality was that the story was very real, because in the story, the father didn't pay a lot of attention to his daughter, or not enough attention to his daughter, so she was always seeking attention. And the reality was that Henry Fonda wasn't a very nice person, and he didn't really pay a lot of attention to Jane. She became an actress so that she could get his attention, and it never worked. So this is the last movie that he died right after this, and this is, of course, she was in the movie as well. Anyway, she never did get his attention, that's the way it actually worked. But in the movie, of course, you know, he said that he was proud of her and all kinds of wonderful things. Driving Miss Daisy, really strange movie. Yeah, these are two old people growing old together, but they're also, it's an interracial relationship. And I'm not saying they had a physical relationship, but of course he took care of her for an extended length of time. And really kind of fascinating because it deals with racial problems as well. Okay. Iris, I've never seen this movie. It's about people getting old. I have no idea. Anyway, 28 Days. This is a kind of a fun movie. Sandra Bullock is a raging alcoholic, and she needs to control her life. And alcohol has taken over her life, and she needs to control her life. So she goes. And she's not serious about being a recovering alcoholic. But in the end, of course, she does, and I can't remember why she does. But in the end, she recovers. Losing Isaiah, I've never seen this movie, but I understand it's a real tearjerker. It has Halle Berry and Jessica Lange in it, and Isaiah, of course. If I understand the movie correctly, Halle Berry's character is a drug addict. She loses the baby because of her drug abuse. Jessica Lange fosters the child, and then she develops a real strong attachment to the child. And eventually, of course, Halle Berry tries to get the baby back, and I'm not exactly sure how it turns out. I'm sure everything works out in the end, or not. I don't know. Maybe it's a tearjerker. When a Man Loves a Woman stars Andy Garcia and Meg Ryan. She's an alcoholic, and he's an enabler. And in order for her to recover, he has to be a little bit mean to her. And she, you know, that part of the relationship, part of the attraction between the two of them is when she's wild and drunk. But of course, they have a child, and she's not able to take care of the child when she's inebriated. Therefore, you know, he has to change. They both have to change, and eventually, of course, they do change. But when they do, yeah, okay, they split apart. And I don't remember what happens in the end. Grace's Choice, women with drug and alcohol problems. I've never seen this movie. I have no idea what it's about. It's got Diane Ladd and Anne Hesh is in the movie as well. Boys Don't Cry. This is really kind of interesting. It's people dealing with issues related to discrimination and sexual orientation. And I don't, in the end, one of the individuals that is, and I don't remember if she's transgender or if she's gay, or he's gay. I can't really remember the movie that well. She gets murdered because of her sexual orientation. And of course, this is in Nebraska, and everybody goes berserk because this person was killed because of her sexual orientation. And it makes people realize that this is not a reason to kill people in Nebraska. Boys on the Side, really kind of a fascinating movie. It's about three women who empower each other. And it has to do with discrimination and sexual orientation. One of the individuals is African American. One of the individuals is a lesbian, I think. I don't really remember the movie that well. But in the end, it empowers all three of them. All three of the individuals become empowered. One of the individuals has AIDS. Okay.
I think one of them had a mom that had a mental disability too.
I don't remember that part. In the end, she dies and they have a party or something. I remember the party. Philadelphia, of course, is about, this movie was made during the AIDS epidemic, before we had a clue what was going on. Really fascinating movie. Tom Hanks's character has AIDS, and he gets fired from his job. And of course, Denzel Washington is his lawyer, and they try to they go to court trying to change things. Antonio Banderas is Tom Hanks' boyfriend, and that was his first major movie, kind of interesting. Anyway, it's about sexual orientation and discrimination. The interesting thing is that Denzel Washington takes the case despite the fact that he's homophobic to some extent. And by the end of the movie, of course, he's not homophobic anymore. But it shows some of the realities of the AIDS epidemic. There was a lot of fear out there. Nobody really understood AIDS. But this movie explained a lot of that. And so it was a really important movie. Brokeback Mountain, this has to do with sexual orientation as well. I've never actually seen this movie, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on with it, but it's two cowboys who are gay, and they're both married. And in the end, their love for each other is relatively strong. I've never actually seen the movie, so I don't know what happens. Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger is one of Heath Ledger's major movies. Of course, he died fairly young, which is very tragic. Interesting, this is about England and the Irish Republican Army. It's about sexual orientation and discrimination as well. This character is actually male. And this individual falls in love with her. I guess she's not really transgender, not at this point anyway. This was actually a movie made before the concept of transgender was popular, so it was really kind of an interesting movie. It's all about Irish Republican Army. You don't understand the Brits and what was going on over there. It gets a little confusing. Another movie about discrimination, sexual orientation, Desert Hearts, and I've never seen the movie. I have no idea what's going on in the movie. Anyway, another movie about discrimination, sexual orientation. Longtime Companion, another movie about discrimination, sexual orientation. I've never seen this movie either, and I'm not sure where it takes place. It may not take place in the United States. Sean Penn, once again, Sean Penn starring in a movie. This is Milk. It's about Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk was was gay in San Francisco. He was one of the first politicians that was openly gay, and he was murdered. He was murdered by an individual that claimed that he went crazy because he ate too many Twinkies. That was the famous Twinkie defense. But he shot Harvey Milk, and the mayor, I can't remember, Alito, I think was the mayor of San Francisco at the time, and he actually killed Harvey Milk and he killed the mayor of San Francisco. And Sean Penn played Harvey Milk. Fascinating movie. Fascinating part of history. White Men with Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, that was Jack Nicholson, and As Good as It Gets. A movie about a man falling in love with a dog. He had a gay neighbor, and he was homophobic. Of course, he's obsessive compulsive, so he's got all kinds of interesting problems. But the reason that he's decided to help the guy was because he fell in love with the guy's dog, which is kind of interesting. And eventually, of course, he falls in love with, he's in love with a waitress. And eventually he develops a relationship with the waitress and with the gay neighbor. But it all stemmed on this dog, this strange looking dog. Anyway, he falls in love with the dog. Beautiful Mind has to do with a white man suffering from schizophrenia. Stars Russell Crowe as the mathematician. He's a brilliant mathematician. He's able to control his schizophrenia through mathematics, which is kind of fascinating if you think about it. Children of the Lesser God. This is kind of an old movie. It's about a white woman who's deaf and things that she has to do in order to feel normal because she's deaf. Really fascinating. And in the end, of course, she doesn't trust people who can hear. Well, anyway. So she has to start trusting people, which is kind of, it's fascinating. My Left Foot says Daniel Day-Lewis, and it's about a man with cerebral palsy. His cerebral palsy is fairly severe, and the first, well, his ability to move his left foot is the main part of the movie. It's really fascinating. Daniel Day-Lewis does an amazing job in this movie. Talking about prisons, how much time do we have? Okay. Talking about prisons, The Green Mile stars Tom Hanks. It's about men in prison. It's really kind of a strange movie because in the end there's magic and all kinds of interesting things. He's able to cure people by touching them. You know, that doesn't sound like the prison, does it? Dead Men Walking is about a man who's on death row. There's a nun that doesn't believe in the death penalty, and so she tries to super him during the last weeks of his life. And it's one of the things that they say when an individual is going toward the gallows or to the electric chair or to be injected with toxins that kill them is dead man walking. That means everybody get out of the way. There's a man who's going to die. And of course that's, it was a really shocking movie, made you want to do away with the death penalty. Shawshank Redemption is kind of a historical movie about men in prison, but it's very graphic, so it gives you a lot of information about what it's like being in prison. If you watch the movie, you don't ever want to go to prison. Saint of Washington, Fort Washington. Fort Washington, does anybody know where Fort Washington is? I used to live in Fort Washington. It's in Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C. It's about people who are homeless and how they survive, how they're able to survive. A lot of homeless people in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has grit, what do I think? They heat the town with steam pipes, and so these people will live on these grates over these steam pipes. So there's a lot of homeless in Washington, D.C. actually. Really kind of fascinating. Fort Washington is in Maryland. Strange movie, Monsters Ball. I never understood the title of this movie. It's got Billy Bob Thornton, Halle Berry, and Heath Ledger are in the movie. Heath Ledger's part is fairly minimal, I think, but it's about struggles of a single African-American mother, which is kind of bizarre because we won't go into what's going on in the movie. Heath Ledger and Billy Bob Thornton are prison guards, and they are the ones that lead her husband on death row. They're the ones that took him to be executed. And somehow, I don't really remember. I've only seen little pieces of this movie, so I've seen the end.
I something about a legacy of cops too, because the grandfather was a policeman and the father and then the son as well.
Oh, Heath Ledger is
Yeah.
his son. Okay.
And they were taught racism.
Right.
That was something that they were getting over, and I think that's what her part was in that.
Was the
So
fact
it's kind of like there's two stories, and they.
I see. And then she has a son, and he gets hit by a car, which is kind of ugly. And Billy Bob Thornton's character tries to save the boy,
Mhm.
and he's unsuccessful. Okay. And then they develop a relationship. The Soloist is really kind of a strange movie. It's about a man who has schizophrenia, but he's a really good musician. And Robert Downey Jr. hears him playing out on the streets, and he tries to do things for him, but of course, because he's schizophrenic, he's paranoid schizophrenic, so he doesn't trust anybody. And it's a really kind of interesting back and forth between somebody trying to help somebody and somebody who keeps rejecting the help. The Joy Luck Club is about second generation Asian American women. This is a Taiwanese movie, challenges in a Taiwanese family. It's eat, drink, man, woman. I've never seen the movie. Really kind of interesting. Anyway. Amrika is about a divorced Palestinian woman and her son. Of course, in Palestine, in the Middle East, women don't get divorced. She's a Muslim woman, and they don't get divorced. So she had to come to the United States, and it's about how she survived. Japanese children visit their grandmother who lived through the bombing of Nagasaki, The Rhapsody in August, really kind of a fascinating movie. It's very Japanese, so they make that really interesting movies. You need to watch some Japanese movies sometime. Fantastic movie, love this movie, Stand and Deliver. It's about a teacher in a low-income Hispanic neighborhood who teaches his students calculus. And of course then they become these math wizards because of the way that he teaches them. I wish we could all teach that way. It doesn't happen. Four Little Girls is about the bombing of the church in Birmingham, where 4 little girls were killed in the bombing. The challenges that African Americans faced. Do the Right Thing is one of Spike Lee's first movies. It's about the challenges that African Americans faced once again. Ghost of Mississippi is about the Freedom Riders during the 1960s in Mississippi. I actually lived just north of where this took place in Noxubee County. I lived in Blaine County, which was Lowndes County, which is the county just north of Noxubee County. Anyway, the murders took place in Noxubee County. Had to do with the Ku Klux Klan. It had to do with the police department being part of the Ku Klux Klan. Really fascinating stuff. Things that they don't want to remember in Mississippi, that these things took place. The Long Walk Home has to do with the Birmingham bus strike that started the civil rights movement. It has Whoopi Goldberg and Sissy Spacek is the white lady that thinks that everything's fine and ignores all the negative things as far as African Americans are concerned. And then one night she realizes when she tries to take her maid home, she realizes the life that this lady has to live. And of course she becomes part of the civil rights movement as well. The Long Walk Home has to do with the bus strike. Celebration, upper middle class Danish multi-generational family dealing with incest and violence. I don't know, it's very Danish. Never seen the movie actually. It's actually in Danish, so it's kind of hard to understand. Rural African family, both parents are suffering from HIV. It's a movie called Yesterday. Tuesdays with Maury, this is an individual suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. If you've ever watched anybody suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease, it's a very slow process. Rain Man, of course, Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise. It's about a white man diagnosed with as an autistic savant. And of course, he's a math wizard, so he can count cards. And so Tom Cruise decides he's going to take him to the casinos and win tons and tons of money. Lars and the Real Girl, I've never seen this movie. White man dealing with mental illness, I'm not sure what it's about. Never seen this movie either, but it has Jonah Hill in it and John C. Reilly. It's about a single white mother who has devoted her life to her 21-year-old son. And of course, that's Jonah Hill's character. I'm not sure what it's about, what's going on. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. This is about a white man adapting to being mute and paralyzed. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. Pieces of April. White middle class family, oldest daughter estranged from the family, mother is ill and dying, and she has aging grandparents. So it's about that. I've never actually seen the movie, so I'm not exactly sure what it's about. Precious, I don't know if you've ever heard of this movie. It was she won the Academy Award for Best Actress, whatever year this came out. Anyway, it's about an African-American teenager living on welfare, pregnant as a result of incest. I think I don't remember who she's molested by, but as you can see, she's also dealing with obesity. Really kind of a fascinating movie, and depressing as hell. The Namesake is about first-generation Indian man in the United States. City Island is about a white blue-collar family dealing with a grown son recently released from prison. Boy, this is fun. As It Is in Heaven is about a white Swedish community with issues related to the impact of bullying on a child and domestic violence. If you don't understand what's going on in Sweden, bullying is very common in Sweden, as odd as that sounds. It's supposed to be the most liberal country in the world, yet bullying is a really serious problem. And the bullying starts in school. And if you are one of the individuals that is bullied, you will be bullied all your life by these individuals. So it's a really serious problem that they try to deal with. I can't remember what they call it. It's a form of hazing. But they'll beat these kids up on the playgrounds. Nicest people in the world, but geez, they're mean to their kids. It's really kind of strange. Winter's Bone is about a poor white Appalachian family. The father's missing and the mother is mentally ill. There you go. So if you want to know about people from Appalachia. Goodnight, Mr. Tom is about a white British family, single, mentally ill mother, where they neglect and they abuse their children, which is always a lot of fun. Children of Heaven. It's a poor Iranian family struggling to manage in the United States, I think, if I'm not mistaken. American Beauty, you've probably seen this movie. It has Kevin Spacey in it and Annette Bening. It's about a family facing its challenges. And one of the challenges is that the mother doesn't like the father anymore, so he moves out into the garage and he keeps having these fantasies about a teenager that lives next door to him. And that's why we're looking at the rose and the belly button in the picture. Because he keeps having these fantasies about this girl. Lost in Translation, challenges faced by white adults. This is about people living in Japan. I don't know why in the world they didn't talk about people living in Japan. There's two individuals. He's older, she's younger. The reason they hook up is because they're the only... He can't speak Japanese, she can't speak Japanese, so they kind of interact together, and of course they form this relationship. But it's kind of like a May-October relationship. That's what I was thinking. Okay. Out of the Air is about challenges faced by white adults. It has George Clooney in it. He gets stuck at an airport, and it's he reflects on his life. And he's trying to interact with other individuals. Of course, he's a gorgeous man, so he's this masked seducer. And of course, he looks back on his life to see if it makes any sense. Life as a House is challenges faced by white adults. I've never seen the movie. The movie, I have no idea what's going on. Life as a House. What a stupid name. $1 Million Baby is about, it's actually about a female boxer. That's what it's about. And Clint Eastwood trains her to be a champion. And but Morgan Freeman is a character that ties the two of them, everything together. He's the individual that does everything. Clint Eastwood just trains her, she just boxes, and Morgan Freeman does everything else. So it's about a relationship between a white older male and a black older male and a female boxer. It's really kind of fascinating. And then she fights for the championship. Edward Scissorhands has to be the dumbest movie I've ever seen. It's one of Johnny Depp's movies. It's about a man who they replace his hands with scissors. Yeah, it's really stupid. I have never understood the movie. Every time I watch a piece of it, I go, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's like watching parts of Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory. Makes no sense whatsoever. It's complete fantasy. I don't understand it. Eternal Sunshine. Challenges faced by white adults. Powwow Highway is an old movie. It's like from the 70s. But it's about an American Indian adult seeking understanding on a road trip to rescue a relative. And it's about this area, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that? It's about the Southwest? Yeah, okay. Smoke Signals, a very famous movie. It's probably the most famous movie about dealing with American Indians. It's about two teenagers from Washington. They seek understanding on a road trip to find their father. And of course, when they find him, he's dead. Yeah, smoke signals. Anyway, it's about the interaction between two teenagers. One's popular and the other is kind of a rejected individual. People think that he's mentally retarded. But the reality is he's just he's an introvert. That's all it is. Skins, I've never actually seen this movie. It's about the American Indian adults battle, greed, and displacement in Sioux country. So if you want to know about the Sioux, I guess you can watch Skins. If you want to know about people from Washington State or from the Northern Plains, you could watch Smoke Signals. And people from this area, watch Powwow Highway, I guess. I've never actually seen the movie. It's a good movie?
Yeah, there's another one called Grand Avenue. It's about a mom, a single mom and her kids.
Grand Avenue?
Yeah, it's another good one. And Dance Me Outside, of course, is another good one.
How old is that movie?
They're probably the same,
Oh,
about the same.
70s?
Yeah.
not a whole lot of movies about American Indians, of course. There we
It's
go.
hard to find that.
I'll see you guys next time. Sorry about all the movies.